Hello, welcome to a new episode of No Stars TV, where we talk about the how more than the who. And today we have director-writer Justin Lee, wrote and directed the movie Badlands. And let's go and take a look at the trailer real quick.
What's your name? Preacher.
Now you're really tempting me to ask what it is you do for a living.
Oh boy. I always knew my sins would catch up to me.
There are some men who would like to see this land taken from us. Now that Father's dying, they will do anything to try and run us off this land.
I've waited a long time to find somebody to take on this task. Someone that did not fear the endeavor. Someone that I could put faith in.
You could always retire. I'm working on it.
It's badge against badge.
I knew you were no bounty hunter. Too calculated, too professional.
Drink that whiskey, boy.
All right, Detective, what do you say we give these folks a good old-fashioned dime novel showdown?
Do you refuse to come quietly?
Nice. And writer director of Badland, Justin Lee, welcome. How are you?
Thanks for having me, guys.
You're very, very welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I grew up in a small town in Washington State, and kind of fell into writing. When YouTube was kind of booming, I kind of fell into that and did a lot of work for like live action video game commercials. And finally made the move to Los Angeles, and just did a lot of different stuff to kind of learn how production, kind of went on a studio level, and realized that's not how you need to do things to make movies. And it was actually Joe Carnahan who gave me some great words of wisdom. He was just like, beg, borrow, steal, do whatever you can to get your movie made. Just get a movie in the can and show people you can make a feature film. And so I made my first movie, not a lot of money, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And yeah, here we are. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So how did you tell me about Westerns? I mean, how did you write Badland? I mean, writers write what they know. What do you know about the Western or Civil War area?
So I mean, listen, I've done Badland was my third Western. I've just been shooting before this whole pandemic hit, was shooting my fourth Western. It was my grandpa's favorite genre, and he's the one who had me watching Clint Eastwood and John Wayne, and I mean even F Troop that was on Nick at Night way back when. Yeah, I actually never really became a huge Clint Eastwood fan till later in my later years, because he had me watching so much John Wayne when I was a kid, and as well as Tombstone. We watched Tombstone a lot growing up. In fact, I remember going opening night to Tombstone. I must have been like 9 years old or something when I went to Tombstone. But yeah, it was really all because of my grandpa, and that's the reason I picked my first film. I said, well, everyone says you can't make period pieces on tiny budgets, let alone a Western. And so that was, I wanted to try to climb a mountain with my first feature. And that's kind of what got me in that. And then obviously just doing stuff for my grandpa kind of snowballed. So I mean, Badland, that's why Westerns. Badland came out of, because I'd made 2 Westerns already, and I went and watched Hostels, and I said, wow, I really want to make something a little more emotionally riveting and try to do something with Wes for one, because I've always been a big fan of Wes, and yeah, I just wanted to do something a little more gritty and whatnot, and that's kind of how we went and watched Hostels, and then it was 10 days later I had a script. So,
Oh wow.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that caught my eye about Badland was the screenplay itself. I mean, it's not a traditional Western. I mean, it's shot like a Western, granted. And yes, you mentioned Clint Eastwood. But when I saw the movie, I thought, wait, this has a lot of references to the Civil War, a lot of commentary you make in there about the Civil War. That's very subtle. Our lead Breacher is not a man on vengeance. He's not going out there for revenge or for some personal vendetta. He's there on a mission, and he's been sent by a senator.
Yeah.
And so he's a man of the badge, as you said in the trailer. So, but this is a very, very skillful screenplay. This is not your typical Westerner. So when you put this together, and Nelson and I were talking about, okay, is this guy like a Civil War buff? Did he understand all this about the Civil War or what's going on with the Pinkertons detectives? So can you tell us more about the screenplay, which it's so well written, by the way, but can you tell us more about it?
Thank you. It went through a lot of changes. 1 minute it would be done, and then other people that were working with me were like, this has to change, this has to change, this has to change. We just went through so many different drafts and ideas, and actually a lot of stuff, probably 23 pages got left on the floor from the original screenplay that had a few more scenes in it. But it definitely changed several times over. The Pinkertons, I know a lot about the Pinkertons. Usually they're put in a really bad light because they did a lot of bad things. And in this particular thing, I wanted to try to put them in somewhat of a good light, with the first black senator kind of putting him out on a mission to right some wrongs that some guys did, obviously during the Civil War. And I hadn't necessarily seen that story be told. We've seen a million different stories in Westerns, right? I mean, they get told over and over and over again, the same kind of basic storyline. A guy tracking down outlaws is nothing new, but I hadn't seen that particular thing done with them. And there was a lot of back and forth with if that, a lot of politics that were being discussed in the sense of, is this the right thing to do with this type of thing? And ultimately, you're a filmmaker. You tell the stories you want to tell. I don't necessarily think people should dictate what you tell as a filmmaker and a storyteller. At least that's my outlook on it. And so we told that particular story. But yeah, there's a lot of history that kind of went into it, obviously, with the waning, kind of how the West, the height of the Western, the old West was in like the late 1870s and 1880s, right? And everyone thinks it was this massive time frame, and it really wasn't. It was a very small time frame, actually, the Wild West. So I think the remnants of the Civil War and going into that time frame is a very interesting period, because you've got a lot of guys who still carrying a lot of weight from the Civil War, which is what made Hell on Wheels probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen for that time period. But I mean, sorry to get distracted, but that's kind of how the story, that's the history behind the story, I guess.
But you touch on a lot of social justice issues in this screenplay. When Harlan and Breacher have that conversation about being bounty hunters, and then the U.S. black senator talking about Breacher's mission. And so what you just said earlier about how many conversations went into the screenplay, and then Nelson and I talked about it for a good 30 minutes. It's just a very, very socially driven screenplay with positive commentary on a lot of sides, but it's a film of principle. I didn't see it as a vengeance film or revenge or anger or violence. It was about the justice, right? And so that's what made this film very unique as a Western, to me at least.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I appreciate the compliments there. I think that having someone have to fulfill someone else's agenda and with the social justice, and then also maintain, their own personal well-being is we don't think about that often, right? And again, the Old West is very fantasized as to all these stories, like the dime novel Showdown, as Jeff Fahey says in the end. And you don't realize the hardships a lot of these guys went to mentally. We talk about PTSD and all this different stuff, and like, guys from the Civil War, man, that was a big part of a lot of those survivors who went through the Civil War. And yeah, it's a crazy time frame, crazy time period.
What was I liked Mathias's like, you know, he's a man of the badge, and there's a certain way he's got to capture these criminals. I mean, when you wrote the part of Mathias, you know, he's very honorable and he's going to do it a certain way. Tell me about his character and how you kind of made him up.
You know, honestly, it started out with a whole different script idea that character kind of came from, which coincidentally was directly after the Civil War. And I think it just blossomed into this movie. And I said, well, if I flash forward X amount of years with that character, what does that look like? And that's what we got. Like people had a skill set from the Civil War. If you didn't have that skill set, you were swinging a hammer on a railroad or you were an outlaw. So if you had a specific skill set, this one being very handy with the steel and whatnot, then you'd find yourself usually in a law enforcement position or as a Pinkerton or as an outlaw. And so I think along with that occupation, you can build around that and say, now where does our character come from? What does he do? What's his backstory? Because a lot of that feeds into that occupation and how he does that job. And so, I mean, that's kind of the backstory. That's what it started from. It was like, hey, I know he wants to, I want him to be a Pinkerton because we hadn't seen that really in movies. And then how do you get to be that particular position? And so, yeah, that's kind of how that came.
And you're right, though. Like, his character is kind of what you hear about the Pinkertons, you know? You know, he had a certain way, you know, he's not, if he finds his bounty, he's not going to just kill him on the spot or whatever. There's a certain way he needs to do this, and that's what he's going to do. And he's not taking the easy way out, really, you know?
Yeah, you know, Pinkertons were pretty gnarly in that manner. Like, they did their job. And like, I mean, you even see in the 20s, the Great Depression, you know, they broke up strikes. You know, I mean, they'd go in guns a-blazing or clubs just beating people. And, you know, again, they got a really bad reputation. And, you know, the crazy story is one of the first agents ever outside of Pinkerton himself was a female, which is a really interesting thing. And it was like 1854. And you know, when you think about badges, you're not thinking about a female Pinkerton agent as one of the first Pinkertons there ever was, and that's a true story. Someone needs to tell that story, right?
Somebody does need to tell that. I want to know that story now. I want to go look that up.
Yeah.
What about the cast for this? So when I was watching the movie, your lead, Breacher, very stoic, you know, man of the badge, you know, doesn't say a whole lot of words. But the cast, I mean, Harlan was amazing. I mean, your entire cast, the Adkins guy playing the bad guy and Jeff playing the bad guy and James Russo and Mira. How did you convince all these actors to be in your movie, which is an unusual Western?
Well, the only one that needed somewhat convincing, I think, was Mira. I had met Jeff Fahey in a bar years ago, and I've been a big fan. And I'm that guy who will walk up and be like, "Hey, big fan of yours," you know. And so I met Jeff a long time ago, and I became good friends with his manager over the years. And so it wasn't too hard to reach out and get Fahey to play the sheriff in the end there. We always wanted Trace in the film. I always wanted Trace in the film, and I feel like I jumped a lot of hurdles to make sure, like, I had a lot of roadblocks from other people on the production that didn't make it easy for me to get Trace, and we went back and forth, and finally we got Trace, and I've become close friends with Trace. I just had him on another production in New Mexico we were working on. Same with Bruce Dern. Become very close with Bruce and Wes. Me and Wes have been talking for quite a few years, trying to figure out a project to work on together. And I don't necessarily always like to go cliche and put a Native American actor in a Native American role in a Western. So I had to kind of figure out what is something that speaks to the time frame, and it isn't just a Native American playing a Native American in a tribe. And I thought, well, make him a bounty hunter. That's really cool, right? And especially in an age where the tribes were dying,
Right.
you know, and he's doing what he has to do to survive. And so Mira, I brought Mira's name up one day, and everyone kind of was like, that's a really great choice. And then she read the script and liked it because it wasn't your typical female character in a Western. And went out to Malibu and sat down with her and had lunch there and talked about the role, and she wanted to do it. So I mean, it all came together. It really came together.
Cool. I was really excited to see you had these 80s horror flick royalty on there. You have Amanda Wyss from Nightmare on Elm Street, Tony Todd from The Candyman, and then Jeff Fahey being a lawnmower man. That was I was like, that one just made me, tickled me a little bit. Like, that was kind of, how was that working with the royalty of horror flicks of the 80s like that?
I've worked with Amanda before. I love Amanda. We're good friends, and one of the biggest things, another movie that me and my grandpa watched all the time was Silverado, and I fought tooth and nail to make sure that Amanda and Jeff Fahey were in this movie. And have you guys seen Silverado?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you've seen Silverado, Jeff and Amanda's characters are pretty much playing themselves grown up from that movie in Badland.
I don't think I might have to go watch.
Yeah.
Again.
So it was kind of a big dream of mine to reunite those two on another Western. And we got to do that, and it was really awesome. So and Tony's just great. Tony's just an awesome actor. And that role, he came, and that really meant something to him to play a character like that, right? That has that job. And because there was a lot of history and like you said, social justice kind of there, and he took that so seriously. It was so great. It was really great.
Hey Chris, can we roll that clip of the U.S. Senator talking to his office aide? Yes.
Someone saw fit to put this man, this Huxley Wainwright, into a position of power. What do I tell a man like Mathias to do here, Henry? It's a road that is not usually crossed. It's badge against badge. I find myself in unfamiliar territory.
Sir, you've come too far to not see this through. He has come too far.
Tell me, Henry, what do I say to a man that I have given such a heavy responsibility? A man that has given his own blood? What words best suit the upcoming storm?
Tell him this, sir.
I have your reply.
Read it, please.
In regard to one Detective Mathias William Breacher, information received. Proceed at your own discretion. By any means necessary.
I mean, that scene puts this Western in a whole different level. And, when I was watching it, I was okay at Western, but then we see that scene in the film, and you mentioned earlier what was happening. I mean, that's what sold it for me. I mean, I thought, okay, this is not, a straight up Western. There's a lot of stuff going on in this, and that scene where you put two African-American guys talking about what has to be done, and you have that younger man, and the message is conveyed, and you reach out all the way to the future, right, to the 1960s. Man, that's just really good writing.
I thank you. It was that was one of those things you put in there, and it's funny because not a lot of people pick up on that. So I really appreciate you picking up on that, because I was writing the script and literally was like trying to figure out certain ways to like incorporate, like you were saying, in there, and it just so happens that Martin Lawrence's Run Tell Dat was on, and there's a whole bit in there about that one line, and I was like, that's such a good thing to quote in a movie like this, in that particular scene, right? And
right,
yeah, it was cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Where did y'all film this?
It was shot in Santa Clarita in California.
Okay. I was on a studio, different locations.
Yeah, shot on Values A Movie Ranch.
Oh, got it. Okay, cool.
So they've shot a lot of Westworld there. But we managed to shoot the whole production on that particular lot, which was cool.
Well, Nelson and I talked about. Hey, Nelson, bring up the whole gunfight.
So one of my favorite parts was the gunfight at the end. Like growing up as a kid, and even till today, anytime you had a gunfight, only one person ever got shot. You know, and I don't want to give anything away about the movie, but it was refreshing to see, because I'm like, these are both people that are good at what they do, and they have a gunfight, and it's always one person, and both people got shot, and that was refreshing for me to see. Is there a reason why you had them both shot? I mean, is that part of the story, or you're like, you know what, I'm gonna have them both shoot each other because they're both good at what they do?
I mean, there's over fantasizing heroic characters in movies all the time, and you have to have the stakes raised. And to me, you had to have Breacher be shot so that it's a struggle to get back. Also, you had to tie in how, again, in one of the original scripts, it wasn't Quaid that shows up at a ranch. It was actually Harlan that shows up to kill Bruce Dern. And Breacher comes out and gets shot twice by Harlan, and they have this whole shootout that was supposed to be Harlan, and it didn't work out that way. And so I had to have Harlan come back at some point, and I thought, it would be changing it up and be great if he wasn't the bad guy, if he wasn't a bad guy, and that he was a friend. They had some kind of that friendship, and so we went that, I went that way with it. And it just made for more drama, right? I mean, you're not really sure if this guy's going to make it back to her and survive or whatnot. And I don't want to give it away. But,
yeah, exactly.
So it was important for him to get shot, in that shootout. And there was a great bit with Fahey that got cut. They cut it out, and I just can't stand that they cut it out. But Fahey ad-libbed a line in there, and it was just right before he falls over, and it was so good. I love Jeff, so it was so good. But
what was the line?
I knew that was going to happen. It was just, you have those happy accidents on a movie where like something like that happens, and everyone on set goes, "Oh, that was awesome," and it was so perfect, and yeah, it was great.
You had so much. There was a lot of physicality in this film: horses, gunfights, locations. What was the most challenging part to shoot in Badland?
The most challenging part to actually film, it was my third Western. I don't know if like having an actual studio lot and being able to just go shoot, I'm not really sure there was a challenging part. That probably to this day has been my easiest shoot that I've gotten through.
Wow. Well, then on the opposite side, what was your favorite scene to shoot?
With that?
And then on the opposite side, what was your favorite scene to shoot?
My favorite scene to shoot.
Or that you shot?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It might have to be that showdown. That was probably, just because it's such a classic showdown, and to get to. I think I've gotten some flack on. There's been some reviews and certain things that have given flack because it's like too spaghetti Western for such a dramatic movie, which was the whole point, was trying to mix the two. So you had those classic elements, but incorporating a dramatic take on stuff too, right? Instead of a kind of a hokey spaghetti Western. And And so doing that and getting to do that with Jeff Fahey again was really awesome, because I guess one of my other favorite scenes is when the lead character is getting waterboarded. That was a spur of the moment thing that wasn't scripted. We were supposed to drown the lead character in the fountain, and the fountain just didn't look that great. And there was a lot of bees. And so I said, let's waterboard him. And Fahey just brought the friggin' thunder in that scene, and he's just phenomenal. So I guess those two scenes are probably my favorite.
Well,
Trace, dude, the opening scene with the classic drawing of the gun and winging down 5 guys like that. I guess those three are my favorite scenes.
Well, if you have, since one of the talks we had was that if it was a spaghetti Western sort of, which I don't think it was personally, then how did you package and get distribution? How were you able to sell this movie, this property, to a distributor?
Westerns do really well domestically. So when you have certain elements of cast in a movie, it's not hard to get distribution. And again, I'd already done 2 films that were Westerns, and I'd done, I don't even know 4 or 5 movies prior to this. So there was already I kind of already had a profile at Targets and Best Buys and Walmarts and stuff like that. So they there's already a base of what we could do for sales, and you start adding cast on top of that. And if it makes sense to a distributor, they grab it, quickly. And with this cast, especially with like Trace and Mira and Bruce, it sold, it was going to sell. Right. And so it got snatched up pretty quick. As I've learned a lot of Westerns, if you have that cast power they do really well. They do really well domestically.
Awesome. Well, those are my questions. Do you have anything you want to state about the movie, Justin, that maybe we didn't ask you?
It was quite an experience. It was definitely, again, it was like the more easier of the movies I've had to shoot. Every movie I've had to shoot, I've had no time, I've had no budget. We've negative 10-degree weather in the middle of Montana, or just crazy circumstances to try to get a movie. You're looking at a stretch of 2 weeks with okay weather, and then on day 4 it snows 4 feet on you, and you're like, what? Wait a minute, how do we go from 60-degree weather to like 20 degrees and 4 feet of snow on the ground? And the script calls for spring. It wasn't a really big stretch, and there was nothing ridiculously difficult about making the movie. Mm-hmm. Pre-production and what comes afterwards, those are different stories, right? But it was a great experience. I have some great friendships because of that, with Bruce and with Trace, and with Fahey, and especially Russo, who's just a classic actor. He's one of my favorite actors, and he's become family to me. And that's the big takeaway. Is some really great friendships came out of that movie.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for telling us about Badland and your experience. And break a leg on your future endeavors.
Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justin. You have a good day.
You too.
All right. Bye.